It was 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when my phone lit up with Emily's name. For 2 full minutes, I just stared at the screen. The last time I'd heard her voice was over 2 years ago, in the chaos-filled hours before my wedding day. A day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life, but instead turned into something I still can't think about without my stomach twisting. I let it ring until it almost went to voicemail. Then, against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was trembling. Not in fear, but in that overly delicate, "Please feel sorry for me" way I knew all too well. "Hey," she said softly. "I know it's been a long time, but I need to ask you something really important." I said nothing, waiting. She took a deep breath. "My wedding's coming up in March, and I was wondering if maybe I could wear your dress." For a moment, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the absurdity hit me like a slap. My wedding dress. The one she'd never even seen me walk down the aisle in. The one she destroyed. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. "You're kidding, right?" I said finally. Emily sighed, like I was being unreasonable already. "I know you're still mad about what happened, but it's been years, and I think this could be, I don't know, a way for us to move past it." Move past it. That's what she called it. Destroying my dress, humiliating me in front of 80 guests, and ruining one of the most important days of my life was now something to move past. I gripped the phone tighter, staring at the wall in my living room, half expecting this to be some cruel prank. But it wasn't. This was exactly the kind of thing Emily would do. Pretend the past was just a minor misunderstanding, and then somehow make me feel guilty for not wanting to forgive and forget. I didn't give her an answer that night. Instead, I hung up with a tight, "I'll think about it," just so I could get off the phone before my anger boiled over. But when I went to bed, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, replaying every second of that awful morning 2 years ago. And I knew if I was going to answer her, I had to start at the beginning. If you'd asked me back then to name the single happiest moment of my life, it wouldn't have been the wedding day itself. It would have been the moment I first saw my wedding dress in the boutique mirror. I'd been saving for years. Every extra shift, every skipped vacation, every impulse purchase I told myself I didn't really need, it was all for that one day. I wasn't planning a royal wedding, but I wanted the details to be mine, to reflect who I was. The venue was a charming converted barn on the edge of town, with fairy lights strung between old wooden beams. The flowers would be blush peonies and white roses. And the dress was my crown jewel. It was an ivory silk A-line gown, with a sweetheart neckline and delicate lace sleeves that trailed just past my wrists. The bodice hugged me in all the right places, then flowed effortlessly into a skirt that seemed to float when I moved. The lace at the hem was hand-stitched, each tiny loop catching the light just enough to sparkle without being gaudy. When I stepped out of the dressing room that day, my mom's hands flew to her mouth and my best friend, Claire, actually teared up. "That's the one," Claire whispered, and for the first time in my life, I felt radiant, not just pretty, seen. The boutique owner warned me, "This fabric stains easily. Keep it in a breathable garment bag, and don't take it out until you absolutely have to." I took her advice like it was gospel. I stored the dress in my closet, zipped tight in its protective bag, and I didn't even unzip it unless it was for a fitting. At the time, Emily had seemed happy for me, or at least she acted like it. She made a big show of squealing when I texted her a photo of me in the gown, telling me how gorgeous I'd look walking down the aisle. But there was something in her tone, a faint edge, like she was complimenting me through gritted teeth. Emily has always been beautiful in a way that turns heads. Glossy dark hair, big brown eyes, the kind of figure that makes people assume she models. She's also always been the center of attention in our family, the golden child who could do no wrong. If she messed up, my parents would twist themselves into knots explaining why it wasn't her fault, or how she meant well. Meanwhile, I was the one expected to keep the peace, to be the mature one. And for the most part, I played that role. I was used to biting my tongue when Emily made little digs at me, or when she somehow turned every conversation back to herself. I told myself it was just her personality. Dramatic, a little self-absorbed, but ultimately harmless. But then she got engaged. It happened about 4 months before my own wedding. She called me out of the blue, giddy, telling me her boyfriend, Ryan, had proposed during a weekend trip to Napa. I congratulated her sincerely. I was happy for her. But almost immediately, she shifted the conversation. So, she said, I was thinking, since our weddings are so close together, maybe we could do a double wedding. I remember actually laughing, thinking she was joking. Emily, I've been planning mine for over a year. Everything's booked. The invitations are sent. That's perfect, she interrupted. We could just merge it all. Think about how much money it would save Mom and Dad. I tried to explain gently that my wedding was something I'd been dreaming of for years, and I didn't want to share the spotlight. Not because I didn't love her, but because this was one of the few things in my life that was mine. Her voice cooled instantly. Wow, I didn't realize you were so selfish. The conversation ended awkwardly, and for the next few weeks, she barely spoke to me at family dinners. My mom hinted more than once that I should at least consider it for Emily's sake. My dad just stayed out of it entirely, as he always did when Emily was upset. At the time, I figured she'd get over it. That was Emily's pattern. Big bursts of drama, then moving on as if nothing happened. I had no idea she was holding on to that resentment like a loaded weapon, waiting for the perfect moment to fire. And that moment came the night before my wedding. If you asked my parents about Emily, they'd tell you she was spirited, free-spirited, if they were being poetic. But I always knew what those words really meant. Emily could do whatever she wanted, and the rest of us would bend around her. It started when we were kids. If Emily didn't want to eat her vegetables, my mom would say, well, she's a picky eater, we can't force her. If I didn't want to eat mine, I'd be told I was being difficult and not allowed to leave the table until my plate was clean. When Emily forgot to do her homework, it was because she's so creative, her mind's on other things. When I forgot mine, it was, you need to be more responsible, young lady. By the time we were adults, the habit was so deeply ingrained that Emily didn't even need to ask for special treatment. It was automatic. Family vacations were always scheduled around her availability. Dinners served what she liked. Even birthday celebrations for other people somehow included her favorite cake. And it wasn't that I hated her for it. Honestly, I'd learned to live with it. It was easier than constantly feeling like I was in competition. But when it came to my wedding, I didn't want it to be another chapter in the Emily show. She, however, seemed to think otherwise. After I turned down her idea for a double wedding, I could feel her simmering resentment. It wasn't just the way she stopped texting me as much. It was the pointed little remarks when we did see each other. Your venue's cute, she said at one family dinner, twirling her wine glass. It's very you. When I asked what she meant, she smiled sweetly. Oh, just small and simple. You've always been a simple kind of person. Another time, when my maid of honor, Claire, posted a photo of us trying on dresses, Emily commented publicly. That's the one? Interesting choice. Even Ryan, her fiancé, seemed uncomfortable sometimes. He'd give me apologetic glances when she made her digs, like he knew she was pushing too far but didn't want to start a fight. My parents, meanwhile, pretended not to notice. Or maybe they really didn't. They'd spent so many years excusing her behavior that it probably didn't register as wrong anymore. The thing about Emily is that she's not just selfish. She's competitive in a way that's hard to explain unless you've lived with it. If you bought a new phone, she'd happen to get the newer model a week later. If you went on a vacation, she'd book a trip to somewhere more exotic. And when it came to relationships, she had this unspoken need to make sure hers always seemed better, happier, more romantic. I sometimes wonder if her engagement timing was coincidental or if she'd been waiting for the perfect moment to announce it. For months before my wedding, right when all attention should have been on me, she swooped in with her Napa Valley proposal story and sparkly ring. I tried not to be bitter. Engagements aren't something you can really schedule around other people's feelings. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice how quickly the family group chat shifted from talking about my wedding plans to discussing hers. And the way she talked about hers, it was like she was building a palace. She wanted a beach ceremony in Hawaii, followed by a sunset reception on a private terrace. She casually mentioned that the dress she was eyeing cost around $10,000, but totally worth it. I smiled and nodded, all the while thinking about the months I'd spent budgeting every cent for my own wedding. Then came the joke that wasn't really a joke, her double wedding proposal. When I said no, it was like flipping a switch in her. She stopped coming to fittings with me, stopped asking about my preparations, and started making excuses not to attend bridal events. The final straw, though, came at my bridal shower. She showed up an hour late, wearing a white lace dress. White lace? I tried to tell myself it was a coincidence, but when she hugged me, she whispered, "Guess I just really wanted to see how I'd look as a bride." Everyone laughed, thinking it was harmless sisterly teasing. But I knew better. That was Emily's way of planting herself right in the middle of my spotlight. I still didn't think she'd actually do anything to sabotage my wedding. She could be petty, sure, but deliberate destruction? That felt too extreme. And then came the night before. The weeks leading up to my wedding were supposed to be the happiest of my life. And in many ways, they were, just not in the smooth, picture-perfect way I'd imagined. I was juggling last-minute vendor calls, confirming guest RSVPs, and double-checking every tiny detail. Seating charts, dietary restrictions, music playlists. Claire, my maid of honor, was my rock through it all, keeping me sane when I felt like I was drowning in decisions. Emily, on the other hand, was a ghost. She wasn't in the bridal party, not because I didn't want her there, but because after the double wedding fight, she'd made it clear she wasn't really into all the frou-frou bridal stuff. I invited her to everything anyway, the shower, the bachelorette weekend, the dress fittings, but she showed up to maybe half, always late, always with some excuse that somehow involved her own wedding planning. It was at a Sunday family dinner, about 2 weeks before my wedding, when the Real clash happened. My mom had made roast chicken, and we were all gathered around the table, me, my parents, Emily, and Ryan. "So, have you thought any more about maybe combining?" My mom asked suddenly, like it was a casual thing. I set down my fork. "Mom, we've been over this. I'm not changing my wedding." Emily smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made my stomach knot. "You know, it's just, with our weddings so close together, it feels like you're intentionally trying to overshadow mine." I blinked. "Overshadow yours?" "Emily, mine was planned over a year before you even got engaged." She tilted her head. "Yeah, but if you really cared about family, you'd want to share the moment. Save everyone time and money." "That's not sharing," I said quietly. "That's giving up something I've worked years for." Ryan shifted uncomfortably, muttering something about maybe dropping it. But Emily ignored him. She went on about how selfish it was for me to hog the spotlight, how I was making everything about myself. The irony almost made me choke. After dinner, my dad pulled me aside in the kitchen and said, "Maybe just think about it. Your sister's sensitive." I wanted to scream. Sensitive? Emily had been needling me for months, and now she was painting herself as the victim. From that night on, the air between us was ice cold. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't ask if I needed help with anything. At the time, I thought, fine. Less drama for me. I figured she'd sulk until the wedding day, then show up and put on her usual performance for the guests. I didn't know she had a completely different performance in mind. Fast forward to the night before the wedding. I was in a suite at the hotel near the venue, surrounded by my bridesmaids. The room smelled faintly of champagne and hairspray, the air buzzing with laughter and nervous excitement. We'd ordered takeout, done face masks, and I was planning to be in bed by midnight. Around 10:30, I got a text from Emily. "Emily, need to talk. Urgent." My stomach sank. I didn't want to deal with her right then, not when I was finally relaxed. Me, "Can it wait until tomorrow?" Emily, "No, I'm in the lobby." I sighed, told Claire I'd be 5 minutes, and went down. Emily was standing near the elevators, wearing a silk robe and holding a half-empty wine bottle. She looked off. Not drunk exactly, but her eyes had that glassy, determined look she got when she'd already decided she was right about something. "What's so urgent?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She launched into another speech about family, forgiveness, and how she was hurt that I hadn't included her more in my wedding. She said she'd been thinking, and maybe we could symbolically join our weddings by letting her walk down the aisle with me tomorrow. I actually laughed out loud. Emily, that's not happening. Her face hardened instantly. You always do this. You always make me feel like I'm not good enough. I told her I was going back upstairs, and that we'd talk another time. She muttered something under her breath as I walked away, but I didn't catch it. I didn't know that those words were a promise. One she'd keep just a few hours later. The elevator ride back up to my suite after talking to Emily felt strange. Something about her expression in the lobby, that sharp, controlled smile, left a sour taste in my mouth. It was the kind of smile she wore when she'd already decided how things were going to go, whether anyone else liked it or not. When I walked into the suite, Claire looked up from her spot on the couch. Well, what did she want? I kicked off my shoes. Same old speech. Family, forgiveness, you're selfish, blah blah. Oh, and she wanted to walk down the aisle with me. Claire's jaw dropped. You're kidding. I wish I was. I grabbed a bottle of water from the minibar. She seemed, I don't know, weird. Like she wasn't just mad. Like she'd already planned something. Claire frowned. Do you want me to make sure she doesn't come upstairs? I waved her off. It's fine. I'm locking the door. And my dress is safe in the closet. I said it to reassure myself as much as her. The dress had been delivered to the suite earlier that afternoon. I checked it twice before dinner, still pristine, still perfect. The boutique's breathable garment bag was zipped tight. The hanger hooked high enough that the hem didn't touch the floor. The rest of the night was light and fun, at least on the surface. We played a silly trivia game about me and Michael, ate leftover cupcakes from the rehearsal dinner, and scrolled through old photos. But I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be Emily again. By midnight, I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. Emily might be petty, but she wasn't destructive. At least that's what I told myself. Around 12:30 a.m., I brushed my teeth, double-checked the closet where my dress was hanging, and climbed into bed. The hotel suite was quiet except for the distant hum of the elevator down the hall. I drifted in and out of light sleep. At one point, I thought I heard the faint click of a door opening, but when I glanced at the suite door from my bed, the bolt was still latched. Claire was asleep on the pull-out couch, breathing evenly. Maybe it was just the room next door. It was sometime around 2 a.m. when I woke again to the sound of muffled footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and far too close. My first thought was that one of the bridesmaids had gotten up to use the bathroom. But the sound wasn't coming from the bathroom. It was coming from the closet. I sat up, my heart pounding. The shadows in the dim light from the hallway made it impossible to see clearly, but I could swear the closet door was cracked open now. I closed it before bed. I got up quietly, telling myself not to freak out. Maybe Claire had gotten up and moved something. Maybe I'd left it open without realizing. When I reached the closet, I peeked inside. The dress was still there, zipped inside the garment bag. I touched the bag, cool, smooth, intact. I exhaled and shut the door again. The next thing I remember is the sound of the elevator dinging faintly down the hall, followed by the soft thud of a door closing. By morning, I'd forgotten about it. Or maybe I'd pushed it out of my mind because I didn't want to start the biggest day of my life thinking my sister was capable of whatever it was I'd half imagined that night. But I wasn't imagining anything, because when I opened that closet a few hours later, the first thing I saw was the deep, angry splash of red across the bottom of my wedding dress. The sunlight streaming through the thin hotel curtains felt almost cruel. This was supposed to be the start of my perfect day, the day I'd been planning for years. Instead, the moment my eyes opened, I felt a rush of nervous excitement, followed by the creeping memory of those muffled footsteps from the night before. I pushed it aside. It's fine. The dress is fine. Claire was already awake, hair tied back, sipping coffee from a paper cup. "Morning, bride-to-be," she said with a smile that made my chest warm. I grinned back, feeling the tiniest flicker of relief. Maybe I'd overreacted to everything last night. Maybe today would actually go smoothly. "Let's get you into that dress," Claire said, setting her coffee down. I walked to the closet, still barefoot, still half in that haze between dreaming and waking. I reached for the zipper on the garment bag and froze. There was a smell. Sharp, fruity, and unmistakable. Red wine. My fingers felt numb as I yanked the zipper down. The bag peeled open, and there it was. My beautiful ivory silk gown, now branded with jagged, dark crimson stains splashed across the hem and trailing up the lace like a crime scene in fabric form. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The world seemed to narrow to that single image. The ruined lace, the bleeding color sinking into the delicate silk. Claire gasped behind me. "Oh my God, what happened?" I dropped to my knees, clutching the skirt like I could somehow will the stains to vanish. But the wine had soaked deep into the fibers, spreading into irregular shapes, drying in some places, still tacky in others. Whoever had done it hadn't just spilled, they'd poured. The boutique owner's voice echoed in my head. "This fabric stains easily. Keep it in a garment bag." It had been in the garment bag, which meant someone had opened it, which meant someone had been in this room. I looked at Claire, my voice shaking. The closet was shut last night. I checked. Her eyes widened. "Do you think?" Before she could finish, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from my mom. "Mom, come to our room, now." The pit in my stomach turned to lead. When we got to my parents' suite down the hall, my mom was pacing, my dad sitting stiffly in a chair, his hands clasped. And leaning against the dresser, arms crossed and eyes defiant, was Emily. "What did you do?" I demanded before the door had even shut behind me. Emily rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, it's just a dress." My voice rose. "Just a dress? You destroyed it. You ruined my wedding day." Her expression shifted from boredom to that faux-hurt look she'd perfected since childhood. "I didn't ruin anything. I was making a point." My dad tried to cut in, but I wasn't done. "A point? What point could possibly justify that? You've been treating me like I don't matter," she snapped. "You didn't make me maid of honor. You wouldn't do a double wedding. You've been acting like you're better than me for months. And I wanted you to understand how it feels when something important to you gets ruined." The room went silent. Claire's hands were balled into fists at her sides. My mom finally spoke, her voice low. "Emily, do you have any idea what you've done?" Emily shrugged. "It's not the end of the world. She can wear something else." It was surreal, like I was watching a stranger speak with my sister's face. This wasn't petty teasing anymore. This was deliberate, calculated cruelty. My mom looked at me helplessly. "Honey, I know you're upset, but please, don't let this ruin your day. Your sister was emotional. We can work around this." That was it. That was the moment I knew nothing would change. My parents would excuse her, like always, and I would be expected to swallow my anger and keep the peace. But not this time. I turned and walked out without another word. Behind me, I heard Emily call out, "You're welcome," like she'd just done me a favor. Back in the suite, I stared at the ruined gown for what felt like hours. The ceremony was only a few hours away, and I had nothing else to wear. That's when Claire, bless her, disappeared and came back with a simple white cocktail dress from her car. Something she'd worn to a summer party once. It wasn't what I dreamed of, but it was all I had. And as I stood in front of the mirror, wearing that plain dress with my hair and makeup done to perfection, I felt hollow. The dream I'd built for years had been stolen in a single night. The night started with a knot in my stomach. My mom had insisted we all gather at her house for a family dinner to clear the air. Her words sounded innocent enough, but the glint in her eyes during the phone call told me otherwise. I knew my family well. This was going to be less of a dinner and more of a trial, and I was the defendant. When we arrived, the dining table was already set. My mom had pulled out her special occasion china, the same set she only used for Christmas or when she wanted to impress someone. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic bread filled the air, but instead of making me hungry, it only made my chest tighter. I glanced at my fiancé, Adam, who gave me a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder. "We'll get through this," he whispered. I wanted to believe him. We all took our seats. Mom at the head of the table, my sister Kara across from me, and my dad at the far end. For a few moments, the conversation was painfully polite. My mom talked about her new garden project. Kara chimed in with some vague story about work. I kept my head down, focusing on my plate. Then, like a switch flipping, Mom's tone shifted. "So," she began, leaning back in her chair, "I think it's time we address the elephant in the room." Adam's hand tensed over mine. Kara's lips curled into a faint smirk. "You mean the whole wedding guest list situation?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake innocence. My dad sighed heavily, as if he'd been waiting for this moment too. I set down my fork. "If we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it honestly," I said, my voice shaking just slightly. Mom folded her hands on the table. "I just don't understand why you're treating your family like strangers. You're inviting Adam's cousins, but not your own aunts and uncles? They've been part of your life since you were born. They've also been making my life hell for years." I shot back. "I'm not going to spend my wedding day being insulted or judged." "That's ridiculous," Mom said sharply. "They love you." I laughed bitterly. "Love me? You mean the way Aunt Diane told me I was too big to wear a white dress? Or the way Uncle Rob made a toast at Kara's wedding about how I'd better hurry up before I turn into an old maid? That kind of love?" Kara's smirk deepened. "Maybe you're just too sensitive. It was all in good fun." My stomach churned. I'd heard that line so many times, all in good fun, used as a shield for cruelty. Adam finally spoke. "This is our wedding. We want the people there who actually support us." Mom's eyes narrowed at him. "I understand you're trying to protect her, but family is family. You can't just erase them because you have a grudge." "It's not a grudge," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "It's boundaries. And the fact that you can't tell the difference is exactly why I don't want them there." The table went silent for a moment. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Then Kara delivered the final blow. "Well, maybe I should just tell everyone the real reason you don't want them there." My blood ran cold. "What's that supposed to mean?" She leaned forward, clearly savoring the attention. "You really want me to say it in front of Adam?" Adam turned to me, confused. "Say what?" Kara grinned like a cat about to pounce. "That she's embarrassed about where she really comes from. That she's been pretending for years that she's better than the rest of us because she has a fancy job and a fiancé with money. That's why she doesn't want the family there. She's afraid they'll tell him all the little stories she's been hiding." My pulse roared in my ears. I could feel every pair of eyes on me. "This isn't about money," I snapped. "And it's sure as hell not about hiding anything. It's about protecting my mental health. If you can't understand that, then maybe you shouldn't come either." Kara gasped, clutching her pearls metaphorically. Mom immediately jumped to her defense. "That's your sister. You can't just uninvite her." Adam stood up then, his chair scraping the floor. "If this is how it's going to be, maybe we should go." And just like that, the dinner exploded into overlapping voices. My mom shouting about family loyalty, Kara accusing me of being selfish, my dad muttering something about keeping the peace. I barely remember what I said. I just remember the overwhelming urge to get out of that house before I completely broke down. We left without dessert. As soon as the door closed behind us, I could finally breathe again. But the damage was done. And deep down, I knew Kara wasn't bluffing. There were stories she could tell. Stories I'd spent years trying to bury. The day after that dinner, I woke up with a pit in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I tried to focus on Mark and our upcoming wedding plans, but the weight of Lauren's words kept pressing down on me. The idea that my entire family had decided I was the problem was both heartbreaking and infuriating. That morning, I noticed my phone buzzing constantly. Texts, emails, notifications from social media. Confused, I opened my Twitter app and froze. There it was. Lauren had posted a long thread, half true, half exaggerated, about me. She framed me as the outsider, The pretentious woman who came between a close-knit family, who supposedly changed Mark into someone unrecognizable. Comments from relatives and acquaintances flooded in, some supportive of her, others questioning me. But the damage was done. Mark was beside himself when I showed him the posts. "I didn't want it to go this far," he said, voice breaking. "I told Lauren to stop, but she's stubborn. I tried to be strong, but inside, I felt exposed and vulnerable. Strangers were judging me for things I never did, and my own family seemed to believe the lies without hesitation." Over the next few days, the tension only grew. At work, I caught whispers and sideways glances from people who followed the drama online. Friends called to ask if everything was really as bad as it sounds. Mark's parents tried to intervene, but their efforts felt hollow, like damage control rather than genuine support. One evening, I confronted Lauren over the phone. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. "Why tear us apart?" Her voice was cold. "Because you don't belong here. Not with us." That sting stayed with me, but Mark stood firm. "We'll get through this. Together." I clung to that promise, even as the wedding day loomed closer, feeling more like a battlefield than a celebration. The morning after that dinner, my phone was buzzing nonstop. At first, I thought it was just wedding stuff, vendors confirming details, friends checking in. But no, it was something else entirely. Lauren had started posting public posts on Facebook, Instagram, even Twitter, threads full of pointed concerns about me, sly jabs masked as worries about Mark's well-being. "I just hope my brother remembers who he really is before it's too late. Some people come into your life and change everything. Not always for the better." Comments flooded in, some from family members, some from distant acquaintances. Everyone had an opinion. Most of them sided with Lauren. Mark was devastated. I begged her to stop. I told her it was hurting us, our families. But she won't listen. I felt like I was under attack from every side. At work, people whispered. I overheard snippets. "That girl, family drama? Who even invited her?" I felt exposed, judged, like I was the villain of some reality TV show. My own family wasn't exactly helping. A few cousins liked Lauren's posts. My parents seemed caught in the middle, trying to stay neutral but clearly uncomfortable. One night, I called Lauren. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Because you don't belong here. You never did. You think you can just come in and change everything? You're not family." That word, family, felt like a slap. But Mark stood by me. "We'll get through this. We have to." Still, with every passing day, the tension grew. Invitations were questioned. Friendships tested. And me? I felt more isolated than ever. The tension in the weeks leading up to the wedding was unbearable. Lauren's social media campaign hadn't just stirred family drama. It was starting to affect Mark and me in ways I never anticipated. At work, I noticed colleagues avoiding me, their smiles forced. Invitations to casual get-togethers suddenly dried up. I felt like an outsider in my own life. But the hardest part was watching Mark become distant. He was caught in the middle, trying to calm his family while supporting me. But the strain was obvious. Our conversations became short, filled with silences heavier than words. One evening, after a particularly awkward family dinner with his parents and Lauren, Mark finally broke down. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted, voice raw. "They're so set against you. It's like I'm losing both of you." I reached for his hand, trying to hold on to whatever hope we had left. "We'll figure it out. We have to." But then, an unexpected message came from an old family friend. She hinted that there were stories about me, things from my past, that Lauren was using to turn people against me. I was stunned. What could they possibly say? The next days were a whirlwind of whispered rumors and half-truths spreading like wildfire. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of judgment and betrayal. Mark tried to stand by me publicly, but behind closed doors, I saw the cracks forming. I realized that the fight for our future wasn't just against Lauren anymore. It was against the entire family narrative being rewritten without me. The wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. Instead, It felt like walking into a storm. From the moment we arrived at the venue, the tension was palpable. Whispered conversations stopped when I walked by. Mark's family greeted me with stiff smiles and sideways glances. Lauren looked like she was savoring every moment of my discomfort. During the rehearsal dinner, everything finally exploded. Lauren stood up, glass in hand, and launched into a toast. It wasn't the usual heartfelt kind. Instead, she launched a thinly veiled attack on me, accusing me of tearing the family apart, manipulating Mark, and hiding secrets. Some guests exchanged uncomfortable looks. My heart pounded. I stood up, voice shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear. If anyone here thinks I'm a villain, maybe you don't really know the whole story. Mark looked torn, caught between defending me and keeping peace. Lauren scoffed. Oh, please, you two think this is some fairy tale. It's not. This family has history, and it's not all pretty. Then my father spoke, his voice heavy with disappointment. Enough. This isn't how we handle things. We're here to celebrate, not tear each other apart. But the damage was done. Arguments flared. Old grudges surfaced. I realized that no matter how much Mark and I loved each other, the family wasn't ready to accept me. That night, as we sat alone, Mark whispered, "Maybe we need to make a choice, them or us." And I knew that choice would change everything. The wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. Instead, it felt like walking into a storm. From the moment we arrived at the venue, the tension was palpable. Whispered conversations stopped when I walked by. Mark's family greeted me with stiff smiles and sideways glances. Lauren looked like she was savoring every moment of my discomfort. During the rehearsal dinner, everything finally exploded. Lauren stood up, glass in hand, and launched into a toast. It wasn't the usual heartfelt kind. Instead, she launched a thinly veiled attack on me, accusing me of tearing the family apart, manipulating Mark, and hiding secrets. Some guests exchanged uncomfortable looks. My heart pounded. I stood up, voice shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear. If anyone here thinks I'm a villain, maybe you don't really know the whole story. Mark looked torn, caught between defending me and keeping peace. Lauren scoffed. Oh, please, you two think this is some fairy tale. It's not. This family has history, and it's not all pretty. Then my father spoke, his voice heavy with disappointment. Enough. This isn't how we handle things. We're here to celebrate, not tear each other apart. But the damage was done. Arguments flared. Old grudges surfaced. I realized that no matter how much Mark and I loved each other, the family wasn't ready to accept me. That night, as we sat alone, Mark whispered, "Maybe we need to make a choice, them or us." And I knew that choice would change everything. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, the air between Mark and me was thick with unspoken questions. Neither of us wanted to admit how much the night had shaken us. Over coffee, Mark finally broke the silence. "I talked to Mom and Dad," he said quietly. "They think I need to smooth things over with Lauren, for the sake of the family." I stared at my cup, bitterness rising. "And what about us?" He looked down. "They said, maybe you're not really ready to be part of this family. Maybe you never will be." Felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to demand that our love was enough. But the truth was, the family had already drawn their lines in the sand. The following days were a whirlwind of strained conversations and cold shoulders. Invitations were withdrawn. Some relatives stopped returning calls. The wedding planning, once a joyful process, now felt like walking through a minefield. One afternoon, Mark and I sat on the balcony of our apartment, the city sprawling beneath us. He took my hand and said, "I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to lose my family." I squeezed his hand back, tears stinging my eyes. Maybe we have to choose what family means to us. We talked late into the night, weighing what we were willing to fight for and what we had to let go. In the end, we decided to stand together, even if it meant standing apart from those who couldn't accept us. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. because whatever came next, we would face it side by side. With the decision made to stand together against the storm of family drama, Mark and I tried to reclaim the joy that had once filled our wedding plans. We booked our photographer, finalized the guest list. This time, carefully curated to avoid those who'd made our lives difficult, and dove into the chaos of choosing flowers, menus, and music. It should have been fun, but every step was shadowed by the underlying tension. Invitations that once felt like celebrations now carried the risk of sparking new conflicts. We debated every name, every seat assignment. Mark's phone buzzed often with texts from his parents, alternating between cautious support and thinly veiled pressure to make things right. One afternoon, as we were tasting cake samples, Mark's face fell as he showed me a message from Lauren. The words were sharp and cutting warnings, threats disguised as concern. Think carefully about how you want this story to end. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. The message shook me. I realized the battle wasn't over. It was just shifting battlegrounds. Still, amidst the uncertainty, Mark and I found solace in small moments. A shared laugh over a terrible cake flavor, quiet walks in the park, stolen kisses between dress fittings. We reminded each other why we'd chosen this path, despite the obstacles. But the wedding day was approaching fast, and with it, the question: could love truly overcome everything? The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, but inside me, a storm was brewing. Despite all we'd been through, a part of me still hoped that today would be perfect, that somehow, love would drown out the noise of hurt and resentment. Mark was calm as I'd ever seen him. He held my hand tightly as we got ready, whispering that everything would be okay. I wanted to believe him, but the tension in the air was undeniable. Guests arrived, smiles on their faces, but whispers still followed. I saw Lauren in the crowd, her eyes cold and calculating, not a trace of warmth. The ceremony began. Vows were exchanged, tears shed. For a moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of us. But then came the reception. A whispered conversation caught my attention. Someone mentioning Lauren spreading new rumors, trying to sabotage the event. I felt my heart sink. And then, during the first dance, Lauren approached. She leaned close to Mark and whispered something I couldn't hear. His face changed. Confusion, hurt, something breaking inside. Later, I confronted him. What did she say? Mark looked torn. She wants me to reconsider everything, to think about my family. I took a deep breath. I thought we already made that choice. His eyes were haunted. I'm scared. That night, alone, I realized that even with love, some wounds take time to heal, and some battles are far from over. The days after the wedding were a blur of conflicting emotions. The ceremony had been beautiful, but the reception's undercurrent of tension lingered like a shadow over our new life together. Mark seemed distant, his smiles sometimes forced, eyes clouded with worry. I could see the weight of family expectations pressing on him, pulling him in directions neither of us wanted. One evening, after a long day, Mark sat me down. Lauren called again, he said, voice low. She's threatening to cut ties with Mom and Dad if I don't make things right. I felt anger flare up, but also sadness. Our family was breaking apart and somehow we were the cause. I wanted to fight back, to tell everyone exactly what Lauren had done, but Mark begged me to wait. Please, he said. If this gets worse, it'll destroy everything. I realized then that the real battle wasn't just about us. It was about what family meant. Was it loyalty at all costs? Was it acceptance, even when hurt ran deep? Or was it about carving out our own path, no matter the cost? We stood at a crossroads, torn between the worlds we came from and the life we wanted to build. And the choice we made next would change everything. The pressure from Mark's family didn't relent. Calls, messages, subtle reminders that loyalty was expected, and my place in their world was still uncertain. Lauren remained the loudest voice of dissent, her spiteful words echoing through every corner of our lives. But Mark and I knew that this wasn't just about us anymore. It was about defining what family truly meant. One quiet evening, we sat together, the weight of months pressing down on us. Mark looked into my eyes and said, I've made my choice. It's you. Always you. Tears streamed down my face, relief and love washing over me like a tidal wave. We decided to step away from the toxicity, to build a life where love and respect were the foundation, no matter who stood on the sidelines. It wasn't easy. We lost some family members. We faced judgment. But we gained something more valuable, peace and the freedom to be ourselves. In the end, I realized that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who chooses to stand by you when the world turns against you. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding after what he did to my fiancée? I say no, because love, loyalty, and respect should never be compromised.